Hi there, and welcome to our new exciting podcast. This is a series all about inspiring the next generation and guiding families and professionals on how to champion the career aspirations of their young people who are neurodivergent or disabled. We are proudly sponsored by Warburton's. Yes, the bread people. Warburton's is committed to supporting educational initiatives like ours to help families and young minds explore exciting career opportunities. Thank you, Warburton's, for your generous support, and thank you for your crumpets. In this episode, we're joined by Hannah Ford Tomlinson from the Lightyear Foundation, a charity working to make science, technology, engineering and maths more accessible for disabled and neurodivergent young adults. What starts as a conversation about STEM quickly becomes something much bigger. We talk about career paths that don't follow a straight line and what it really takes to build confidence in the workplace and why the environments we create at work matter just as much as the roles themselves. You'll hear some honest reflections from Selena and Lucy, our hosts, as they share their own experiences of navigating education and employment, including the barriers that still exist and what needs to change. And at the heart of this episode is a simple but powerful question. What if the working world was designed around what people need rather than expecting people to fit into it? This is a conversation about possibility, about inclusion, and what happens when people are given the right support to thrive. Hannah, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very, very well. We are halfway through the week now, so I think we're doing good. We're doing a good job. So we would love to have a chat with you about careers, Hannah, basically. This is the reason we're here today. So what I want to do is I want to just very briefly introduce you to our volunteers who are hopefully going to be asking you some of our questions. So what I will do is hand over first to Selena and then to Lucy. And then if you could tell us a bit about yourself, that would be fantastic. So without further ado, Selena, thank you for joining us. Can you tell Hannah a bit about who you are and why you're here today?
Hi, I'm Selena. I'm a HR Management Master student at UE. I'm neurodiverse and I have cerebral palsy, and I was really interested in disability consulting, so I reached out to Lucy. We had a chat over Zoom, and I've done some radio work in the radio station that Lucy founded. And then I saw this podcast advertised on LinkedIn and I asked if I could be part of it. It was quite funny because it said 16 to 24 and I'm 25, so I did ask if I'd be too old, but I'm not. Yeah, I've never done a podcast before. I've done radio work before. This is my first time doing podcast work.
Very good at it as well. And I'm not saying that because it's our podcast and it's really good. I'm just going to briefly introduce Lucy as well. Lucy, hello, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the show. Can you tell Hannah a little bit about who you are and why you're here today?
First of all, a bit confusing. Different Lucy from the one who runs this all.
Yes, just to clarify, this is a different Lucy to Lucy Smith, but yeah.
I do mentoring with Becca. She's my mentor for almost a year now. I cannot think of what else to say. I've done work on a few podcasts before with inclusive change. Yeah,
and you're doing an amazing job. So what Lucy hasn't said, but I will say for her, because she's very humble, is that she's done an amazing job writing scripts for us and researching for the Future Voices podcast that we've done before, and has done a fantastic job of it and is very good at it.
And I'm not just saying that because she sat right in front of me and because she's one of my mentoring clients. But yeah, she's really, really good at what she does. So we're very happy to have her back. Hannah, we would love to hear a little bit more about what you do at the Lightyear Foundation and just a little bit more about how you got into the role you did as well. So can you tell us who you are and what you do at the Lightyear Foundation?
Absolutely. It's lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my name's Hannah Ford Tomlinson, and my pronouns are they, them, and I work for the Lightyear Foundation. So the Lightyear Foundation is a charity, and as far as we know, we're nationally unique. And what I mean by that is we're pretty sure that we are the only charity in the UK doing specifically what we do, which is working to make STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, more accessible for disabled and neurodivergent young people. Of course, we don't really want to be nationally unique. We want lots of different charities to be doing this work. But at the moment, that's our kind of specific focus, and we're pretty sure we're the only ones that are doing it, which is, challenging and exciting. And my job is that I'm the Communities and Partnerships Program Manager. So the way that Lightyear works, there's kind of two different paths to what we do. So we think that STEM is for everyone, and we work to provide accessible and inclusive opportunities in STEM for young people who are disabled and neurodivergent. So that looks like going into schools. We have a youth group of disabled and neurodivergent young people who kind of guide the work that we do. So there's the work that we do with young people. But then we think, well, if we want to make STEM more accessible for young people, then we have to not just work with the young people, but work with the wider STEM sector. So that's organizations, companies, businesses who are kind of doing science, doing engineering technology, but also the people who are doing STEM engagement. So people like science museums, science centers, people who, like us, are trying to kind of encourage and empower young people into STEM, but they're not necessarily thinking about disabled people. So we're working with them to say, well, can we also be thinking about accessibility and inclusion? So long story short, my work is mostly on the side, the partnership side. So working in the STEM sector to make things more accessible and inclusive. That looks like delivering training, all sorts of different things. But I'm also the communities manager, so I also manage some of our projects which are working with young people to kind of build those communities of disabled and neurodivergent people who really feel that STEM is for them and somewhere they want to be.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, wow. First of all, we're a little bit biased because we know the Lightyear Foundation from working with you previously, Hannah. But yeah, it's so important and really lovely to see how much of a difference you're making. I mean, you mentioned like before we started recording that there's only 3 of you, but based across the country, and you've already made such a huge impact on just, like young people's lives, I think it's fair to say, right? And to go back to what you said about, STEM as a subject, like we obviously know what STEM is, but for anybody who's not listening, would you be able to give us a bit more of an overview of what STEM is and what you like about it? I think because it's clear, obviously you wouldn't be doing this job if you didn't enjoy it, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sometimes guilty of actually just using the word STEM without even saying what it stands for. I did remember to at least say what all of those words mean, but absolutely, let's talk about what it means a little bit more. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and maths. I'm going to complicate things even more by saying that sometimes there's 2 M's, it's STEM, and sometimes it's got medicine on the end as well. And some people actually want to talk about what STEM has to do with art, and so they put A in the middle and call it STEAM. But most of the time, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and maths, and that's everything to do. I mean, it's huge, really, because it kind of encompasses everything that people do to understand the world around us. It's all of the ways that we think curiously and creatively. We ask questions about how things work, why things are the way that they are. That's really what STEM is looking at. Those are the questions that we're trying to answer. I mean, what's not to like about it? I think that what I really love about STEM is that STEM is really less about what we know and more about how we know it. So I think sometimes there's this misconception that STEM is, you find it in textbooks, you find it in the facts and the figures and how big things are and how fast they move and how many things there are. And really what STEM is it's a way of of asking questions and finding answers, working together, working with other people to say, okay, what do we think is true? How do we know whether or not it's true? And what can we test? What can we try out to see if we're right or wrong about the world? And I just think that's really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could have put it better myself, to be honest. And I really resonate with what you say about, it can be for anyone, because we are a community that has a really great, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like, we're a community of non-lateral thinkers. So actually the world of STEM is really, really good for us, because problem versus solution, right? Like, it's an ideal, I don't want to use the word puzzle piece, but it's an ideal way of us using those skills and enjoying it as well. Like, it's clear to see how you're really, really good at it and you enjoy it. So I am going to pass you over now to Lucy, because I believe Lucy would like to ask you a question. Lucy, please take it away.
Yeah, Hannah, can you tell us about your career path from school?
Absolutely. I would love to tell you about my career path. So I actually went to school in Germany, which is a little bit different. And I went to an international school. So probably a little bit different than schools in the UK. But one thing that I did really like when I was at school was doing science. I was actually a bit of an all-rounder. I liked a bit of everything. And because of the school I went to, I didn't have to kind of stop doing any subjects that I didn't want to do at all at any point, really. By the time I graduated, I was still loving English, and I was doing history and psychology and science and maths. I was still doing a bit of everything. But I did decide right at the end that what I liked the most was doing science, doing physics. So I went to the University of Manchester to study physics. I am English, so I came back to England for university, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed my course very much, but I realized as I got towards the end of my degree that I liked talking about science more than I liked doing science experiments, doing science research in a lab. So I decided to do another degree, a science communication degree, which was all about understanding how to talk about science, how to talk about STEM, what people like about it, what people don't like, how to kind of help people find the bits of STEM that they find interesting and exciting. So I did that degree, and then I did that degree, but I did it part-time. So, and along the way, I needed to support myself. So I did 2 different jobs while I was doing that degree. The first one was working in a restaurant, which I think to this day gave me most of the important skills that I use in my job. So customer service, just learning how to talk to people. I haven't actually mentioned yet, but I'm autistic. So it doesn't always come super naturally to me, understanding how to talk to people, and kind of, especially people I don't know. I had to learn, and I learned a lot of how to do that while I was doing that job. I often joke, it's still in job interviews to this day, sometimes in a job interview, they'll ask you, what's a stressful situation that you've dealt with? And I like to say that I don't think you've really experienced stress until you have worked in a restaurant at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, when all of your tables are full and you've got a queue out the door and people are waiting for their takeaways, and it's a very challenging situation. And I now know, I didn't know I was autistic at the time, but the sensory environment as well was very loud and busy, very, very difficult. But I learned a lot of coping strategies, and I learned a lot of important skills doing that as well. And then the other job that I had was working in a science center. So I was a weekend science presenter. So families and cub groups and different youth groups would come in, and I would do science shows and science presentations and help them get excited about science and about STEM. And then eventually, right as I was coming to the end of my degree, I got a job working in a science museum as an explainer. So I was similar kind of science presenter work. I was doing science shows and demonstrations, and actually the science museum that I worked at also had steam engines, so I would also get to help run the steam engines, which was super, super exciting. So I worked at that museum for 5 years, and I actually was lucky enough to do lots of different jobs. I started as an explainer, but eventually I moved into more of an office job. And then about 3 years ago, I started doing a little bit of work. I was working full-time at the museum at that point, but I'd heard about the Lightyear Foundation. I knew at that point that I was autistic, and I was starting to get really excited and passionate about accessibility and making STEM more accessible and inclusive. And they were looking for people to deliver science workshops online, working with disabled and neurodivergent young people in schools, in special schools mostly. And so I signed up to do that kind of on the side from my main job. And then last year, I was very lucky. I left my job and I was doing little bits of freelance, little bits of work here and there. And then I got this job with Lightyear, working full time. And it's really my dream job because it's everything that I loved about studying science and STEM at university. I use all of those skills that I learned, how to talk to people, meet new people, build relationships with other people who care about STEM and who care about accessibility. And yeah, I get to work with brilliant people and I love what I do.
Yeah. I mean, that's so lovely to hear. And you can tell just by speaking to you as well, Hannah, that like this is something that you've really like grasped at the root, to quote idol of mine, Angela Davis. Yeah, like it's really, really clear to see that like this is something that you absolutely live and breathe, and it's just so lovely. And I think just off your point of accessibility, obviously there's a lot about the working world that we're not necessarily prepared for as people who are neurodivergent. So when you were speaking about working in the restaurant, so I'm diagnosed ADHD, pretty sure that I'm possibly autistic as well, as my assessor pointed out last year. And I could never understand why that was stressful for me. Like that I could talk to people, but the stress and the anxiety of having to do the talking and like you've got to go and speak to that person, I could never place it. Like I'd be like, why is that so stressful? Because I can talk to people, but I don't like it. Why is that? Like, and that it wasn't until I got my diagnosis I was like, makes more sense now. That's a bit like, so I think it's something that we definitely need to talk about more in the workplace, because everybody's communication needs are different, and that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that they need to work around something. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Selena for question number 4. Selena, are you happy to read out your question for Hannah?
I really resonated with this question when I read it, but if you could click your fingers and change one thing about the working world as it is now, what would you change?
That's such a good question, Selena. And I'm going to tell you right away that it's really hard for me to pick one thing. But I'm going to try really hard not to cheat. I'm going to try really hard to pick one thing. I think that what I would do if I could click my fingers is I would click my fingers and say that every single person only needs to work as much as they are able to and in the way that they want to. I think that there are a lot of people who are forced to do work that isn't quite right for them, that's really, really difficult for them when they shouldn't need to. There should be kind of more support available for people who aren't able to work or aren't able to do that kind of work. But the other thing that is so important is that every person who is working has the support that they need to do the job in the way that's right for them. I think every person who gets a job, whether it's a paid job, whether you're volunteering, the first question should always be not how can we get you to do what we want. It should be, what do you need to do this job and be as healthy as possible, as happy as possible, and get the most out of the work as possible. I think that's what's most important. And there are some fantastic workplaces, and the Lightyear Foundation is one of them, where that is very much the case. But I would love to see that everywhere in the working world.
Thank you. I definitely agree with that. I think there's a lot to be done.
Yeah. Would you like to share with Hannah a little bit more about why you chose that question? Like, is there anything that you've experienced, for example, that you have to share?
Yeah, so I did a law degree. I initially had my heart set on being a lawyer. I wanted to go down the solicitor route and qualify as a solicitor. Throughout my degree, I got to do some work experience, and I noticed that a lot of people in the working world and online, I've seen a lot of people discuss about how inaccessible the legal industry can be for people who are neurodiverse. But I have cerebral palsy, and a lot of people might not know that that does mean that you are neurodiverse. So I found that people didn't really have an understanding. So for instance, I have extra time in assessments. So they have a lot of assessment centres for when you're applying for training contracts and things, and extra time in interviews. And people wouldn't really understand why I needed that kind of support. I struggle with cognitive processing and information, so I need someone to break it down for me. And we'd all be put in like an office space when I was on work experience, where it was like all the partners and everyone working in one room together, and I'd work much better in a separate room. And things like not being able to carry my morning coffee over to my desk and having to have somebody else pick it up and take it for me. And I found that I would have to do work experience, and the working hours are quite intense in law, and I just felt so exhausted by the end of the day. And a lot of the time they do expect you to continue working once you leave the office, especially if you've got a case and you're working on a deadline. I also wanted to do a part-time master's in law with the solicitor's qualification, and my university had cut the part-time version of the course. As you mentioned, Hannah, you did your degree part-time. I did my law degree part-time, but they said that the way that my current master's courses run, they wouldn't be able to do it part-time because the university would lose too much money. So I couldn't go on to qualify as a solicitor because I couldn't do the course full-time.
Yeah, I think, thank you for sharing that, first of all, Selena.
Much.
Yeah, like, and I think that, yeah, it's really horrible you had that experience, and that shouldn't have been the case. But I do think it's important to talk about it, and it's important to share, because it speaks to a working world that still, while it's doing a lot of things right, we've still got a long way to go in a lot of respects, right? I mean, like when Selena was talking about, you know, the specific barriers and things that she's experienced, Hannah, I mean, like as neurodivergent people, it can be really hard for us as well, because it's not something that I'm late diagnosed, so this is a journey I've been on for a while. But like, was there anything that Selena said there that you really resonated with about like any specific strengths and challenges that you've had at work? Would you talk about that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Selena. Yeah, so much of that resonated with me. There are so many barriers, aren't there? There's so many things in the way that just don't need to be there. That's the real thing that I took away from what you said is why shouldn't you have support for someone to carry a cup of coffee over to your desk? It's not difficult, or to have that extra time that you need. I think that part of the work that I do, that I find the most rewarding, is talking to managers, talking to organizations about what we call reasonable adjustment, which legally organizations do have to do. The Equality Act says that workplaces need to make reasonable changes so that disabled and neurodivergent people can take part and do the work that we really want to do. And absolutely, just that little bit more time in assessment centers, so we've got that time to process and think and understand the question that we're asked, being given questions in advance for interviews. Unless you are a politician, you do not need to be able to answer interview questions professionally. That's just not part of anyone's actual job. Yeah, I hear you completely. I also love what you said, Selena, that you're actually studying now in HR management, which is amazing because HR departments can do so much. So to answer your question, Lucy, about kind of the specific challenges that I've faced, I think that it was once I got to university, so I had a lot of support at the school that I went to, kind of by accident. They didn't know that I was autistic, but I just got really lucky that the school I went to, there was a lot of built-in support. Because it was international school, there was kids from all over the world. And what that means is there was a lot of kids that struggled to understand each other just because of the language. So the fact that I struggled to make friends or talk to people was totally normal. So there was loads of help from the teachers. You know, they would pair you up to make friends with people. You would go on trips to make friends with people. There was all this kind of support. So it was harder when I went to university and I didn't have so much support and I had to kind of make it up on my own. But I struggled, and I used the mental health support at the university, which made a huge difference. I always had people to talk to about what I was struggling with. Again, even though I didn't know it was autism and I didn't know it was being neurodivergent, I just knew I was having a tough time. And then once I was in the world of work, I think what made a huge difference for me is I always had managers who were kind, who were understanding, who gave me the time I needed, who asked me what help I needed. And actually the HR departments were very supportive as well. So again, it took me so long to realize that the problems I was having because I was neurodivergent. But, you know, my managers would do things like, if they had to. So at first I made a few social mistakes, I guess, at work. I was always very over friendly. I would meet new people and immediately treat them like they were my best friend, because that's how I felt. I felt very comfortable, especially people I really liked. And my manager had to kind of say, like, I understand that you get on really well with this person, but you know, you're hugging them a lot and we are at work. So I know that they don't mind. I'm not saying that they have a problem with it, but just so you know, we don't usually hug quite that much in the office. And I was absolutely devastated. I was so embarrassed, and there was this unwritten rule that no one had told me. But the way that my manager did tell me was so kind and so patient, and they gave me time to feel how upset I was about that. And they said, you don't have to do any work until you're feeling better. So just little things like that, moments of kindness and patience, and just explaining the things to me that weren't obvious. I think that's what has made the biggest difference to me throughout my career, is people asking, what support do you need? What can we do to help? And then giving it to me.
Yeah. Do you know what? That is, I think, a really, really good note to end on. Is we thrive with the right support. And we talk a lot about boundaries and actually psychological safety being really important at work. And that does not mean asking people to sit on a chaise lounge and talk about everything that's, you know, been difficult for them in their life. But it does mean being able to create a space of, I hear you, what do you need from me? Which is something that we really champion at Inclusive Change. And I'm really pleased that you've had that experience, Hannah, and you've had a manager who has gone, do you know what? You can talk to me. It's okay, because that's often what we need sometimes. So yes, Hannah, it has been absolutely lovely to speak to you today. It's been really eye-opening for me as somebody who's always been very anti-maths, you know. But yeah, absolute pleasure. It's been wonderful to interview. Where can people find you and find out more about the Lightyear Foundation?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Honestly, I would recommend checking out the lightyearfoundation.org. That's our website. There's a couple things on our website that I'm really proud of. One of the things that I'd love to share is we have a program called Celebrating STEM Stories, which has profiles, what we call role model profiles, of disabled and neurodivergent people that are working in STEM or have STEM as a big part of their daily lives. I think we've got 30 in total at the moment. Some of them are videos, some of them are written down, but they're just really lovely examples of people, you know, like me and like you, who are thriving and having, you know, living great lives, working or enjoying STEM. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Lightyear Foundation. It's we're on all of the big social media platforms. So yeah, do check us out.
Fabulous. We will be sure to. Well, Hannah, thank you so much again. And thank you so much to our guests, Lucy and Selena, for joining and asking questions today. We very much look forward to seeing what the Lightyear Foundation has coming up in the future, Hannah. And please do keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Future Voices Career Conversations, sponsored by Warburton's, the family bakers. Do subscribe and find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just look for Future Voices from Inclusive Change.